Hello everybody and welcome back to 89 Games and our continuing guide series on the Gloomhaven characters. So we've completed all of the standard Gloomhaven characters, and now we're going to talk about the expansion characters from the Jaws of the Lion. There are 4 of them, and today we're going to be talking about the tank of those 4, the Redguard. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started right away with his cards, and we'll talk a little bit about his playstyle. So as a tank, he's more of an AoE type of tank than single target high damage tank, so you're not going to be doing a lot of damage to single characters, and in fact some of those tougher higher health characters are going to be really hard for you to handle on your own. But when it comes to taking out large groups of smaller enemies, the Redguard excels at doing that, and you also need to focus a lot on having light and fire active to use a lot of your extra abilities on your cards. However, the advantage that the Redguard does have going for him is that he has a lot of abilities that will cause suffer damage to enemies, so it won't require an attack roll at all, and you can just do straight damage to enemies. And that's how we're going to build him today. So you're going to be focused a lot on just making enemies suffer damage, and he's going to be really good against shielded enemies. So let's go ahead and talk about his first card here then, Swift Strength. Swift Strength is an attack 2, range 2, target 2, and pull 1 on the top, and then on the bottom is a move 2 jump with a shield 1. This is a pretty good all-around card that we'll use for quite a while, especially with a low initiative. It's really nice. But let's go ahead and just talk about Flame Shroud real quick. We're going to jump down and talk about that because this one pairs really well with that, and so do a lot of our other cards. So Flame Shroud with initiative 6, so it's very easy to go early with this one. The next 5 times an enemy enters a hex adjacent to you, that enemy suffers 2 damage. It activates fire, and of course this is a lost card, it's a burn card. So you only get to do this 5 times, and it can get used up pretty quickly, but you do 10 guaranteed damage over the life of this card being activated. So early on, for the first couple of levels, maybe level 3, 4, you do some pretty decent damage with this. If you play this early on, it really helps clear out the first room of a scenario. So I really like this one, and you pair that with something like Swift Strength where you can attack 2 targets and then also pull them to you to suffer that additional 2 damage. So this is really good for taking out those early low-level enemies, and is a strategy that will really build the character around for the first few levels. Now once you get to like level 5, 6, it starts to become a little less effective just because the health pools of the enemies are getting a lot larger. So then we'll move on to Healing Sands. Healing Sands is a nice little heal 4 for yourself. This is a nice card to hang on to for a long time because it's basically a free health potion that you can reuse every rest. It's really good for getting your health back, especially since the Redguard does have some shield abilities, but he doesn't really have any permanent shields to add to himself. So you are going to be taking damage. You're going to be more of a sponge tank than a shield tank, so it's a good idea to have some extra heals. The bottom of this one also is really good for negating damage, as it's a move 3, all attacks targeting you gain disadvantage. So not negating, but mitigating damage, as everything would have disadvantage attacking you. So I really like that one. We hang on to that one for a while. The next one is Shield Spikes. This one is Retaliate X, where X is your current shield value on yourself. Now this is a permanent card for the whole scenario, so if you want to go the shield route and play a lot of shield cards almost every turn, you know, and then you have armor in your shield, that should add into this as well because that's shield value. So you could potentially be retaliating for 3, 4, maybe, you know, from time to time, but more often maybe only 1. And if you don't have any shield activated, it won't do anything. So there is an argument to be made for a shield/retaliate build to do with a Redguard, but that's not the way I'm going to go today. The bottom of this one, though, is a nice little heal 2, range 2. It activates Fire Force, so that's good. And also with having the range 2 on there, we could actually use this to heal allies as well. And then the next one is Flaming Sickle. This is a nice little basic attack 3, but it's got range 2, and you pull 1, you activate fire. And then the bottom is all adjacent enemies suffer 1 damage, and then you loot 1, activate fire. So as far as loot cards go, this is actually really, really good because if you can get up to a group of enemies, 2, 3 enemies that only have 1 health left and finish them off, you can finish them off with the suffer damage and then immediately loot all the gold piles. So the Redguard's really effective at collecting gold by using this card and the next one because the bottoms do the same thing. They just make enemies suffer 1 damage and then loot. And this also pairs well again with Swift Strength and Flame Shroud because you could do 2 attack, 2 damage from Flame Shroud is 4, and then you throw in the adjacent enemies suffer 1 damage. Now they're up to 5. You know, 3 of that was suffer damage that couldn't be negated or defended against in any way. So again, really good at doing the suffer damage, taking care of those low health enemies. The next one is Blinding Sickle, which is essentially, it's very similar, except there's no pull. Instead, you immobilize and it activates light on the top, and then on the bottom, it is the same, except for you're activating light instead of fire. So these two guards are good early on for activating these two elements for you. You could use the top of one, the bottom of the other to get both those elements activated to pull off some combos that we'll talk about here a little bit later. So these are decent cards to keep in there, although it's not necessary to keep both because they do essentially the same thing, and you could activate the other element from a different card. And then the next one is Twirling Stabs. I do like this one. It's low attack value, but it's nice because it targets all adjacent enemies. So, you know, if you used something like Swift Strength, you pulled enemies towards you, you're tanking, so other enemies are coming up to you. You've got 3 enemies. You have Light to activate, then this can be attack 3 on everything around you. Plus you gain the XP for it. So it's not a bad attack. It's a good little decent melee attack for when you're surrounded. And then the bottom is nice for a bottom attack where you can attack 2, and if you have fire to use, you can also add wound to it and gain an XP. And then the next one is Flame Shroud, which we already talked about at the top. The bottom is a move 4, and if you have shield, you can activate, or if you have fire, you can activate a shield on yourself. So this one's good for the mobility. Move 4 is good because the Redguard, you will find that you do not have a lot of good mobility with the Redguard. So it is nice sometimes to have a move 4 or move 3 thrown in there just to give us a little bit extra mobility. And then the next one, Shocking Advance, is an attack 3 immobilize. If you have light, you can shield yourself 1. The bottom is a move 3, activates light. So again, this is another card good just for activating that light with a move on the bottom. That's really nice. And the immobilizes with the melee attacks, I am not a fan of though, because even when you are trying to tank, the enemy's already not going to move to attack anybody else generally anyway if they're already adjacent to you, unless they have a melee multi-attack. So immobilizing them really doesn't do you any good unless you're going to move away from them. And then the next one is Shield of the Desert. This one I really like early on, especially because if you can get both of your elements activated, it really powers it up. So it's attack 3, but with fire, it becomes a target 2 adjacent enemies in that pattern on the card there. And then if you have light, it adds +1 attack and a push and an XP. So this can be attack 4 on 2 targets with push if it's fully powered up, which is really, really good, especially at like level 1, level 2, that's a pretty strong attack. And then the bottom of this one is a shield 3. You get to activate fire and light both, gain an XP, but it is a burn card, so I really don't see this one being worth it as a burn, unless if you are playing shield spikes and you're about to get hit by a ton of enemies, you know, and you have this activated where you have 3 shield, then yeah, you could do a lot of damage with it. It might be worth it in that case, but in general, just for the 3 shield, I don't think it's really worth it. And then the last of the level 1 cards is Desert Knight. This is an attack 2 disarm. You target 1 enemy within 2 hexes. It's a ranged attack, but not a ranged attack. You can attack an enemy within 2 hexes, so if they're only 1 hex away from you, they're adjacent to you, you don't have to have disadvantage because it doesn't have a range on the card, but you can still hit an enemy that's 2 hexes away. So this is a little unique in that way, and it does activate Frost and Dark, which doesn't do a whole lot for the Redguard. There's a few cards that might use, I know there's some that use Frost later, but in general, you're not going to get a lot of use out of those elements. However, doing the disarm is the main point of this card. It's nice to be able to disarm an enemy, keep them from being able to hit us on the next turn. And then the bottom is a move 6 with jump, which is really great for mobility, but it is a burn, and I wouldn't recommend using a burn for movement unless you really, really need to move. So then we'll talk about these X cards real quick. So the first one, Warrior of the Sun, shield 1, immobilize, target all adjacent enemies, and then you create light. This again would be good if you're playing the shield spikes game where you're going to have extra shields and make the enemies take the damage. You immobilize them so they're not going to move away, they're going to hit you, they'll take the extra damage from retaliate if you have shield spikes on. But otherwise, it's really not that good of a card unless you just know you're going to take a hit and you just need the extra shield. The bottom, though, is a decent little attack with an attack 2, but if you have light, it can add +1 and a muddle to it and an XP. So that one's actually really good for, you know, getting that burst damage off. But again, we're still talking about pretty low damage numbers, pretty low attacks for the Redguard, which makes it harder for him to handle tougher enemies or high shield enemies, unless, of course, we're using, again, the suffer damage, which is what we're going to focus on. So then the next one is Blade Dance. Blade Dance is a neat little card on top where you can attack 1, range 3, but if you have fire, it's attack 2, range 3, and pull 2 with 1 XP, and then you can move 2, and then you can do the same thing again, except using light instead. For if you have the light, it becomes attack 2, pull 2, 1 XP. This is a good one, again, also to combo with Flame Shroud. If you can get both your elements activated on turn 1, so say you use Flame Shroud turn 1, and then the bottom of Blinding Sickle or Shocking Advance, and you get Light and Fire both activated, on the next turn you could do Blade Dance, where you could pull an enemy towards you, make them suffer that 2 damage, and then move away from them and pull them to you again and make them suffer a total of 4 damage in 1 turn. So that could be a really good move against maybe a boss or an enemy that has a lot of shields. So that's a nice little combo that you could use if you want to play that card. The bottom is a move 4 with jump. All enemies move through suffer 1 damage. If you have light, they suffer 2 instead, but this is a burn. So we're already going to be using Flame Shroud probably, which is 1 burn. I'd be very careful about what we use a second burn for. Make sure it's worth it if you're going to do it, because we do only have the 10 cards. If we burn another one too early, we're going to limit our turns. The next one is Precision Strike. So this one is an attack 4. If you get to add 3 if the target has a negative condition, and if you have fire, you get advantage. So it's attack 7 with advantage if the enemy has a negative condition and you have fire. Now it is a burn. So again, early on, maybe if you're fighting a boss, this might make sense because you're going to do a lot of high damage early on. Make sure you do it with advantage. Maybe throw in a power potion or something to make it attack 8. Maybe it'd be worth the burn, but in general, you're not going to want to be using this on your standard enemies for a burn probably. The bottom, though, is a move 2, pull 2 with range 3. So again, that could be used in conjunction with another card where you do suffer damage once enemies are adjacent to you. When we talk about level 1 here and the level X cards, generally when I play the Redguard, I don't really change any of the level 1 cards. I pretty much leave everything in there for level 1, because none of these really stand out to me as super special or better than any of the others here, except for maybe Blade Dance if you want to do that combo I talked about. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into the leveled cards now, where we'll talk about level 2. And we're going to find Harvest Sickle and Barbaric Instincts. Now, you'll notice that with the Jaws of the Lion characters, they did a little bit better job of making the card choices a little bit more important. Like, there's not clearly a better card. There's kind of different builds you can go with based on those 2 cards, or those 2 cards might be good for. So some of these decisions are a little bit tougher than they might have been with the base characters. So Harvest Sickle is an attack 4, range 2. You activate Grass and Light, which Grass, as far as I can remember, doesn't do anything for the Redguard, but it could help a party member. And then the bottom is a move 5. You loot each hex you move through with movement, but then it burns. So again, a movement burn. I don't like those. The Harvest Sickle, the attack damage is good. It's a higher attack for us, but I think we're going to get more out of doing suffer damage and kind of controlling the battlefield with our pulls. So I like Barbaric Instincts here because it's a shield 1, you pull 1 at range 2, and then all adjacent enemies suffer 1 damage. So I'm going to get my shield to protect me, and then I get to pull an enemy next to me, and maybe there's another one already next to me, because I am tanking again, so there should be enemies close to me pretty much all the time. So they're going to all suffer 1 damage, and then I can play the bottom of Blinding or Flaming Sickle, and they can suffer another damage. And I did 2 damage, which, that's not 4. That is less than 4, but if we're talking about shielded enemies, this is going to be just as good as Harvest Sickle probably. And then the bottom is a move and an attack if you have light to use, and then the attack wounds. Plus the initiative is really nice for keeping us going early. So I like Barbaric Instincts here because it does the suffer damage, and that's what we're sticking with. So that's what I'm going to go with here. And then to add that one in, we're going to have to take Shield Spikes out because I'm not using the Retaliate build. Now, if you are, then you're going to want to build this character a little bit different than I'm going to do here. But we're going to take Shield Spikes out and put the Barbaric Instincts in. And then we'll move on to level 3, where we're going to find Warmth of the Sun and Strangling Chain. Now, Warmth of the Sun is an interesting one. Attack 3. If you consume light, it becomes +1 attack and muddle with an XP. And then you get 1 XP automatically already, so it could be 2 total XP. It burns though, but it does attack in this like melee triangle pattern. It can hit potentially 5 enemies with it. So you could do a lot of damage, but usually you're never going to get 5 enemies lined up in that pattern. You're going to have maybe 2 enemies in there, maybe 3. And then the bottom is a heal 4, range 1, activates light. So that's good if we need the heals, but hopefully since you're playing more of a tank role, you have someone else in the party that's actually got the heals going on. And plus we already have Healing Sands anyway. So the other one is Strangling Chain. This one is an attack 3, immobilize, but each time the target is attacked this round, it suffers 1 damage. If you have fire to consume, that becomes 2 damage instead, and you gain 1 XP. This one I really like because if you can get your party to work together and be like, hey, can you guys all attack this target this turn, it's going to suffer an additional damage. And remember, that's suffer damage, so it goes through shields. So even if someone only has, like, well, I'll only have an attack 1, it's not going to do anything, well, they'll still suffer 1 damage, and you'll get through their shield. So this one's really good for having your party or summons, whatever, team up on 1 target and get an extra 2, 3, 4 damage off on that target in that round. So this is a really good team move. Plus, again, you're going to immobilize them. You know, if you're moving away, that's great. If not, then, you know, it is what it is. And then the bottom is a move for immobilize all adjacent enemies. So again, in this case, you are going to end adjacent to them, so the immobilize is kind of pointless. But I like the top here for helping buff up our allies, plus a nice low initiative. So we'll take Strangling Chain. We're going to take Shocking Advance out, put that one in, because we're still getting the attack and the immobilize. What we are going to lose is the activation of Light, though, which limits us a little bit. So you do want to pay attention as you build your deck. Sometimes you might want to have to put something, back in to get enough activations of Light and Fire if you're using some of those combos. Okay, so we'll move on to level 4. At level 4, we've got Radiant Sickle and Burn Away the Dark. So Radiant Sickle is an attack 4, range 2. All enemies adjacent to the target suffer 1 damage. It activates Light for us. That's a really strong card overall, especially, you know, if we're hitting someone that's got other enemies next to them, we're going to be doing suffer damage to them, which is great. The bottom is a move 2, heal 2 at range 2. That's also really good because we get to move and heal ourselves, or maybe heal a teammate. The other one is Burn Away the Dark. This is an attack 1. Target all enemies within 2 hexes. If you have fire, you can wound. So that's really good for getting that damage over time on them, but it is low damage. And then the bottom is a move 2. You disarm, target any one adjacent enemy, which that's good. And then you can also consume ice and dark to make them into fire and light. So that takes us back to Desert Knight, where we could create those 2 elements. And then on the next turn, you could turn those into the elements that you could use, but that seems a little convoluted. I like Radiant Sickle here because, again, attack 4, so we're giving ourselves a decent attack finally, the one that we skipped before. And then we can also make all enemies adjacent to that target suffer 1 damage, which is really good. So we're going to take Radiant Sickle and replace Blinding Sickle, because we're essentially doing the same thing on the top. It's a little bit different, but, you know, we're getting the damage. We're still activating Light with it. So we'll take that. We'll move on to level 5. And at level 5, with the Jaws of the Lion characters, you only get 1 card at level 5 because they each have their own very special, unique mechanic with their level 5 card that applies only to them. And in the board game version, you usually get access to an extra little token or mini or whatever that you can put on the board. If you're playing the physical game, it's really cool, like, I get to open a new toy thing. So that's where this comes from. On the digital version, of course, we're just getting this 1 card, and then of course you will get the piece to put on the board, but of course it's digital, so it's not as cool as opening a physical one, probably. However, Sand Devil, it allows you to place the Sand Devil, which is like a little tornado, in any adjacent empty hex. It is considered a trap for the purpose of monster focusing and movement. At the start of each of your turns, you can move it up to 2 hexes. You can force any character to move that is on it to move with it, so you can carry characters along with it. And anytime a character moves onto it, or it moves onto them when they're not moving together, the character suffers 1 damage and gains Muddle. So this is an active card, it stays active the whole scenario. You gain 2 XP when you use it. This is essentially a mobile trap. You can move it around the board, making enemies suffer 1 damage by putting it on them, or if they walk into it. Plus they get Muddle from it as well, which makes them less effective on combat. So in general, it can be useful, and I think knowing what I know now about traps and how you can use them, it's a little bit more useful than I may have originally thought when we first played through the game. So you could use this as a trap to block off areas, because it will be, you know, enemies will treat it as a trap, which means they will try to not go through it. So you could use this to block off certain portions of a map to make enemies take longer routes, to make it easier to take them out one at a time, just like we might do with other characters and their trap cards. But then when you're done, you can move this to the next spot and block off another spot. So really, if I was going to be using it, probably how I would use it is to kind of control the battlefield and the flow of where the enemies go, more so than the 1 damage, unless you're using it to maybe finish something off. And then the bottom, though, is really nice for our mobility with that move 5. So we're going to go ahead and take the Sand Devil at level 5 because it's no fun to not take it. And then we're going to replace Desert Knight to put that one in. And then we'll move on to level 6, where we're going to find Fierce Brilliance and Flying Sickle. So Fierce Brilliance, the next 4 times an enemy enters a hex adjacent to you, that enemy gains disarm, and then you activate Light. This card is actually really good for survivability because every time an enemy gets adjacent to you, they're not going to be able to attack you. And then you could, attack them, move back, and the next turn they move to you again, they'll be disarmed again. So it's not a bad card. It's short-lived because you only get 4 uses out of it, but I do like it because it does that disarm. It's guaranteed. The enemy can't hit you if they're a melee character because they're going to get disarmed when they move next to you. The bottom is a move 2, and all adjacent enemies suffer 2 damage. That's really powerful. I like being able to move, and then they also suffer that damage. Plus, I use another card maybe on the top that makes them suffer damage. This is where you could get 3-4 suffer damage out on a bunch of enemies really easily, really taking out a lot of shielded enemies and stuff like that. So I do like Fierce Brilliance. Flying Sickle is the other card with a nice attack 5, range 4, and pull 3. It activates Wind, which again is useless for us as the Redguard, but someone else might be able to use it. So this is a really good attack if you're finding yourself like annoyed that you need a more powerful attack. This would be a good one to have because it is an attack 5. It's pretty strong, even at level 6. And then the bottom is a nice attack 2. If you have Light, you can move 2 and then attack 2 again. Or if you don't have the move with the Light, at least you can attack 2 and attack 2. So this is really good for burst damage. However, we're going to go with Fierce Brilliance here because of that bottom, more so than the top even, because being able to move and make enemies suffer damage, it is really powerful. So we're going to take that one, and at this point it's time to take Flame Shroud out, and that's what we're going to take out to put Fierce Brilliance in, because at this point we're not doing as much damage. Enemies have more health. Now you could leave this in, it's still useful, but if we're going to burn a card, we might want to use Fierce Brilliance now to do the disarm and get our damage other ways with our other upgraded cards now versus using Flame Shroud. So we'll move on to level 7, where we're going to find Vicious Ballet and Horns of the Beast. So Vicious Ballet, this is a fun one. It's an attack 3, and then if you have fire, an adjacent ally can also do an attack 3, and you gain 1 XP. And then if you have light, another ally, a different one, can also perform attack 3, and you gain 1 XP. So this is attack 9, essentially, if you have those 2 allies next to this enemy that can also do these attacks. So if you do have a party of 2 or 3 melee characters, this card really makes a lot of sense. If you have the element active, you can get those extra attacks out of those other characters, and they get to pull another modifier. And at this point, you're at level 7. Your allies probably have some decent modifiers in there. Maybe they have some things that activate elements that they can use on their turn. So this is a really cool attack. I like Vicious Ballet. The bottom is also really nice. One adjacent enemy suffers 1 damage. You move 2. Another enemy suffers 1 damage. You move 2. Another enemy suffers 1 damage. Now you could use this all on the same enemy as well. Just keep dancing around them, and they would suffer 3 damage. So this is really good, again, for just putting that suffer damage out there, not worrying about attack rolls. So I like Vicious Ballet. The other one is Horns of the Beast. This is more of a basic card. So if you're more about, hey, I just want to do as much damage as I can, Horns of the Beast is good. It's attack 4, push 1. It attacks that little triangle pattern. It activates Fire Force, gain 1 XP. So it's a decent attack on a couple enemies. And then the bottom is a move 2, shield 3. If you have light, you can make that shield 4. But this is a burn, unfortunately. So again, if you're using shield spikes though, you get up to like retaliate 4 with that. If you're going to get hit a bunch with 4 shields, you're not going to take any damage. You can do 4 damage to everything that hits you. So with that combo, that could be worth it. But I'm going to go with Vicious Ballet here. And then we're going to take out Twirling Stabs to put that one in. And then we'll go ahead and move on to level 8, where we're going to find Prismatic Sickle and No Fear. Prismatic Sickle is actually a really, really nice, really powerful card for the fact that you can create whatever elements you want with it. So it's an attack 4, range 3, so that's already a decent attack, even at this level. However, you get to activate 3 elements, whatever you want. So you need your fire and your light, you go ahead and activate them, and then you can have a 3rd element for somebody else. This is really powerful for getting your team the elements they need, or getting you the elements you need. It's really convenient to be able to make whatever you want. And then the bottom is a loot 2 that's not a burn. And then it also allows you to activate one element. So there are situations where that can actually be really nice. Like, hey, I get to collect a bunch of gold and still activate my element for the next turn. So I really like Prismatic Sickle for the fact that it creates those elements for us. And then No Fear is anytime you are attacked this round, you gain shield for the attack, where the shield is the number of enemies adjacent to you at the time of the attack, up to a maximum of 3. So during the round, if you have 3 enemies next to you, you'll get 3 shield. But if you have 4 enemies, you still only get 3 shield. If you have 2 enemies, it's 2 shield, so forth and so on. So it gives you shield to protect you when you're surrounded, which as a Redguard, the way he plays, you're probably going to be surrounded quite a bit. So I can see where this could be useful. Also, again, pairs well with shield spikes. The bottom is the next 5 times an enemy enters a hex adjacent to you, you perform a heal 3 self action. So this essentially is negating a lot of the damage that you'd be taking, because they're going to enter the hex, you're going to heal 3, then they're going to hit you for 3. And then someone else hits you for 3, heal for 3. That's kind of nice. I see the appeal of that one, plus a 1 initiative is always really nice to make sure no one beats you. But I'm going to go with the Prismatic Sickle here, because I think creating those elements is just too powerful, especially if you have another party member that really uses elements a lot. So we're going to take Prismatic Sickle and take the Sand Devil out. So the Sand Devil is useful, but I think, it's not useful enough to justify keeping it in forever. Just depends on how you're using it and your mileage, and mileage will vary. Of course, the move 5 is nice, and we're losing that. So then we're going to move on to level 9, where we're going to find Soaring Shield and Honorable Fury. Soaring Shield is a move 3 with a jump, attack 4 and stun all adjacent enemies. And then you activate fire, get an XP point, but this card burns. So attack 4, stunning adjacent enemies, that is really strong, but for a burn at level 9, I really don't think it's that good. The bottom is a move 3 jump, you shield 2, if you have wind, you can shield 1 more. So again, if you're playing the shield spikes build, then this would actually be really good, the bottom of this for that. However, I'm going to go with Honorable Fury, because Honorable Fury here is an attack 5 with range 2, but if we consume fire, it becomes attack 6 with range 4, and then all enemies adjacent to our target suffer 1 damage. If we have light, we can add an additional +1 attack to make a total of attack 7, and then we gain advantage, and then we muddle our enemies. So it's attack 7 at range 4, muddle, and we have advantage on it. That is a really strong, solid attack, and it's a reusable attack, so we can use a stamina potion, get this right back, do it the next turn, as long as we have all of the elements, of course. And then the bottom is a really nice move 3 if we have light, and then all adjacent enemies suffer 3 damage. Again, a lot of suffer damage, really nice. So we're going to go with Honorable Fury for our last card, and then we'll take Healing Sands out, because at this point, we'll have healing potions, maybe allies can heal us, it's not as important that we have that. Honorable Fury goes in, and there we have the Redguard at level 9. So this, again, like I said, we're focusing on suffer damage. There's a lot of cards in here. They're going to make enemies suffer 1 damage, 2 damage, 3 damage. That's how we're going to be doing a lot of our damage. And then our attacks are just kind of like the bonus on top. Like if we hit something, we do damage, great, and then we're going to make it suffer. So shielded enemies will not stand a chance against you with this build as a Redguard. It'll be really easy to take them out. However, bosses and some bigger enemies, you're going to have a little harder time. It's going to take you a little longer than you would like to finish them off. So with all that said, let's go ahead and talk about our items real quick. We'll go over to the merchant. So for head items for the Redguard, early on in the game, Eagle Eye Goggles could be really good because you do have some multi-attacks. Or you could go more of like I'm tanking route and pick up the Iron Helmet. And then also, later on, like Protective Charm makes you immune to poison wound is always good for a tank. So that kind of gives you an idea. There's not a whole lot that's really good for you. The Hawk Helm could be good if you want to increase your range, because your range is kind of low. So then we'll move on to body armor. So obviously for your body armor, you want armor for the Redguard. You're tanking, you need shields. Take the hide armor, take its various upgrades. There's really not a lot else to talk about there. If we move into the hand items, now obviously we're going to want to take a shield for, again, defense. We're tanking. And then as far as items for weapons go, though, we can kind of mix it up a little bit because we do have some melee attacks, so the melee weapons do work for us. Something that I might like is like Brilliant Blade or the Inferno Blade, because we'll have light and fire activated a lot, and we can get a +2 attack from it if we have no other use for that element at the time. The other one that's good is Barbed Axe, where we can add wound to an entire attack action. So if we're doing a big area attack, we're hitting all adjacent enemies, we're hitting 3 or 4 enemies, we could also wound them all with this, which could be really good and add that extra suffer damage to them. So there's a couple ideas that we could go with for our hand items. And then for feet, like I said, our mobility is going to be an issue. So we could go Boots of Striding to get the extra move on a single move ability, but I'm leaning more towards, for Redguard, maybe Comfortable Shoes and its various upgrades to increase our basic move so we can move more consistently. Because if we use our Boots of Striding, it's gone until we rest again, and then we're going to be stuck with mostly move 2s, which is going to make it hard maybe to get into position to tank and to be able to get in range to hit enemies. So I like being able to move a little more consistently, a little farther every turn. So I think maybe the Comfortable Shoes might be the better bet there once we get those unlocked. Early in the game though, yeah, Boots of Striding is what you'll have to go with until you unlock something better. And then finally for our bag items, as always, stamina potions are great. They get your cards back. Power potions would be great, especially for the Redguard when you're using a lot of your multi-attacks. They'll help you do a lot more damage overall. Definitely pick up a healing potion for the Redguard because you're going to be, especially with the build I went with, you're going to be shielding a little bit less. So you're going to want to be able to heal yourself. And then other items that make sense too would be like the Moon Earring, because you can recover your armor. Especially, again, if you're doing the Retaliate build, getting your armor back is going to give you that Retaliate back as well. So Moon Earring's really good. And then the other thing would be the Rings of Brutality and Haste. Actually, because of your suffer damage, being able to play 2 tops or 2 bottoms on the same turn, plus your other card, of course, the top or bottom of the other card, you could potentially do 3 cards that cause suffer damage and do like 4, 5, 6 suffer damage in one turn. So these could actually be a really good option for you too, depending on how you build and how you're playing the Redguard. So that's my quick and easy recommendations for items early on. Let's go ahead and talk about his perks now. So perk-wise, we've got some interesting ones here. So first off, Extreme Fortitude, gonna give us that ignore negative item effect so we can wear armor without taking negatives from it. Plus, it also gives us like 2 +1 cards added right away. So that's a really nice one to take first. And then once you've done that, let's go about removing our negatives. So we can remove 2 -1s twice to get it down to 1. And then we can remove 1 -2, but we also have to remove a +1. But that's okay because it's still a net positive. It gets rid of our -2. And considering we added 2 +1 cards at the very beginning, that's not that big a deal. So let's do that one. Now that we've done that, we've got some interesting choices, and I really like the ones that activate the Light and Fire for us because we need that a lot, especially with the build that we just went with here. Light and Fire is going to be really important to have active. So we're going to go Blazing Light first because it gives us +1 Light and Fire activation cards, which is really nice. And then before we go grab these other activation cards though, I think we're going to go ahead and get rid of some more zeros. So we can replace a +0 with a +1 wound, and then a +0 with a +1 immobilize. We'll grab those to give us some more +1s. And then we'll go up here and replace +1s with +2s that give us fire and that give us light. And now you could just go back and forth on these to make sure you keep them even, however you want to do it. And then at that point, we'll go ahead and just grab Bulwark to give us the +1 with shield. And then we can get rid of our zeros, and that will top us off. So modifier-wise, the Redguard is actually really good. If you look at it, you have a pretty high chance of pulling a +1 no matter what. Like, if you don't pull a +1, you're getting a -1 or a miss. So even with our attack 2s, they're going to be, most of the time, at least an attack 3, even a good chance of being actually an attack 4. So while our values look low on our cards, once we get sufficiently leveled up and get enough perks, we're actually going to be doing some pretty decent average damage overall, plus activating our extra elements, which will also in some cases give us more damage. So his modifiers is not too bad, plus you only have the 2 negative cards. Pretty strong overall. Alright, so that is the Redguard in all his glory. As a tank, he is a very interesting one. Like I said, he has a lot of range attacks, which tanks normally don't have. He doesn't have a lot of shield ability, so he's kind of a squishy tank as far as tanks go, but it's more about control and about doing that suffer damage. And as far as playstyles go, he actually is a really fun character to play because he's very unique in the way his cards work, in the way his weapon works, where he's got that range and doing the suffer damage. So I highly recommend him as a character to try out for sure. He's definitely better, I think, at lower levels. As you get higher later in the game and enemies have more HP, he's probably not as solid, but he is a fun character to play. So with all that said, if you want to watch more of this Gloomhaven guide series, you can watch this video here. And then remember to like, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. It helps me out and the channel so very much. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day and keep on gaming.